Going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank. White woman explains why white people in America believe this is like 1930s Germany, right? And she's going to do it better than I can explain it. I mean, I can tell you about it, but not as good as she can tell you about it. But it makes a lot of sense because most white folks who are racist and are afraid of black people haven't even met one. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was shocked that there were white people who've never met a black person in their entire life. I was the first black person they ever met, and they could not believe I was the way I was. They every stereotype they believed because that was pumped into their TV screens and radios in their all white communities where they had no access to a contrary point of view, no access to somebody who can what do you call challenge their way of thinking. And of course, if you're inundated by the white European American culture, they reinforce the stereotypes that African Americans have to deal with, right? Creating a cesspool and a manufacturing plant of scared European Americans who, as soon as they see a black person, because of the way their heads been filled up and the way the propaganda has been built in their heads, they automatically activate their fight or flight response. And most of the time it's flight, unless it's like 30 of them, right? So without further ado, let's listen to this European American explain it. I mean, it makes common sense because there's no way you would think that any rational human being would be so afraid of black people when in fact black people has never displayed any hostility towards Europeans ever unless we were defending ourselves. Even now, you would think out of all people in the world, well, Native Americans, right? Us the Native Americans, right? You would think that we would hate all white folks in any given chance we had a chance, we would take one out, right? And we would be justified in that. We would definitely be justified in it, but we're not like that. We're peaceful people. And we don't hate white people. We just hate what they do. We're annoyed of the constant pressure that we have to deal with the insecurities of Europeans, right? Because they affect our lives, right? They legitimately affect our lives. And no human being is going to tolerate that. But for so long. But we've tolerated so much, right? And we will continue to tolerate as necessary. But there is a fine line, right? That I think at this point we have reached, right? To where Europeans are going to have to fundamentally change or else, if you get what I mean. You know, so without further ado, let's listen to this European American explain and put some common sense and some context behind why these Europeans just seem to rationally just be willfully ignorant about American history and why it is that the smart racists do their best to maintain their ignorance. Because an ignorant population is an easily controllable population. A smart population makes decisions on individual bases and they don't fall for every word that comes out of some rich white person in suits mouth. Also, they are now realizing that they've never had the privilege that comes with being white. They've had a card that's been expired from the beginning. They were tricked, and they will find out that if, even as a white European, if you buck the system, you are in fact the enemy as well. And you will be dealt with the same way these white people have been dealing with everybody else who dare to fight back against their injustice. Anyway, tell me what you guys think in the comment section. It's Afro Think Tank. Learn something, teach something. I'm out.
I feel like the reason white people right now are referring to this period of time in America as being like 1930s Germany or like World War II or schmatzy and all of that stuff is because honestly, we weren't taught about anything else more in depth than World War II. We got to be the heroes in World War II. That's why we got to read Anne Frank's diary. That's why we know, quote unquote, so much about the leading up to World War II. Everything else was glossed over in your public school education. The civil rights movement, like we love MLK, but we never learned about the Tulsa massacre, right? We never learned about what led up, like how bad things were leading up to the Civil War. Like we just heard about the Underground Railroad and it was great. And, you know, like the women's right to vote movement, like, yeah, it was like, finally they did some marches and then they got their right to vote. We never actually read about all the people in our own system who were doing horrible things to fellow people. And right now we've all been able to live in this system, people that look like me specifically, with that bubble privilege, especially if you've lived in a community where you have zero proximity to anybody from any other marginalized group at all, which there are plenty of just white community. I'm living in just a plain white community right now. It's the most white bread place ever. And coming from a diverse city like New York City and having worked on 6 continents, this is crazy to me. But I realize that the people's experience and education is the reason why they can only refer to this as being 1930s Germany. And in saying that, we all need, if you look like me, we need to get educated, because ICE showing up in Minneapolis isn't because of immigration or race. It is because white people dared to disobey. And if you think that you're protected because you live in a white community, or, you know, you make 6 figures or even 7 figures, you're not, because you're not the right type of white. They are coming for you if you don't comply. The term white was made up and started being used regularly after the Bacon's Rebellion in the 1700s by white wealthy colonialists to get control of white poor farmers who were rebelling and setting things on fire. They were rebelling and setting things on fire because they were pissed off that they had to keep fighting natives for more land to farm, and they were barely making any money. And the white wealthy colonialists were like, oh man, no, we shouldn't be fighting. Like, we're both white. Like, more farming and my success is your success. Sounds familiar hundreds of years later, right? That trickle-down economy, or like, you know, buy my meme coin. When at the end of the day, they have used us to be obedient and to provide cheap labor. And the moment you stop being obedient and providing cheap labor, the moment you stand up to them is the moment that you are no longer white to them, because you never were the right kind of white. It's the same reason why when the Irish and Italian first came to the United States, white Americans did not want them here, because they did not want to melt into the pot. They held on to their belief system and their culture far too long. Same thing with Polish people. They were unwanted. They wanted generic white bread, no identity, and that's what we've been taught in school. We were always the hero. Nothing ever we did was ever wrong. And oh my God, now we're living in 1930s Germany. We're not. This has been happening to other communities in this country since the boat first landed here. And we've done it to all the indigenous people who have lived here before us. Like, we need to recognize that the only way we're going to get out of this is if we get a little bit uncomfortable and know that we weren't taught. And I don't fault you. I don't fault you for not knowing. This was the system that you were born into, and it created you and trained you and propagandized you to be this way. And now that it's happening to you, you're freaking out. Rightfully so. It sucks. But this has been happening. This has been our country this whole time. This isn't new. It's just new to people that look like me. And I'm sorry if this pissed anybody off. And I know I missed a lot of stuff in there. I'm just trying to talk to people that look like me to stop making references just to Germany, because honestly, this has been happening here for a very long time. And the only way we're going to get through this is if people that look like me start recognizing that this wasn't about immigrants or race. This was about wealth and power, and you are only as valuable to them in how much you will obey and how cheaply you will work. And until we recognize that the people standing to the left and right of us and beneath us are not the problem, this will never stop. And it'll get worse. And I don't care how white your neighborhood is.
Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan.
Thanks for watching Afro Think Tank. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And follow me on Substack and Patreon for more content. Remember, it's Pan-Africanism or nothing.